Oh shit, Chi-Chi? Is that boy nasty, Nate?
So, you just picked the Wayfinder, or you're just genuinely curious on all the different type of archetypes and what class you should be playing? Well, I got you covered. Alright? So, essentially, right now, in Wayfinder, there are three archetypes that we have. We have our Warmasters, which consist of Wingrave, Sanjaya, and Grendel. And we got our Survivalists, which consist of Silo and Venomous. And then finally, we have our Arcanus, Nis, and Kairos. The timestamp indicators for each archetype and individual character as well that will have, so you guys can kind of skip forward to whatever you want to look at individually. I'm going to be starting off with just the Warmaster archetype as a whole.
I am ready to serve.
So, at first, I mean, look at that. Just look at that beautiful skin drip. Didn't cost a dime either. Just have to play the game. Anyways, into Wingrave's kit. Wingrave, when you go ahead and you take a look at his abilities, he has his Right to Strike. Performs a powerful Radiant Strike. Incoming damage is reduced by 25% while performing the ability, and hitting an enemy will cause an explosion of healing energy to heal Wingrave and nearby allies. Cooldowns are refreshed upon using a melee finisher. And a melee finisher there is a set series of moves that you can go through. I think it's like 5 light attacks for a dagger, complete a combo, and then it's a little bit less for heavy attacks. For heavy attacks for a dagger, it's a little bit different. But there's like little combo iterations you can find in between. If you guys want like a combo video or something, I mean, that is more than something I would be willing to make. But as of right now, just going straight into as a skill. I'm just going into an expedition real quick to show y'all. But as y'all saw on the skills, you get 7 skill points that you can use interchangeably. You can reset them at any time you want. But basically, the max upgrades a single skill can get is 3. And you have a total of 7 for each individual character. And depending on what you use them or how much tiers you go into will kind of like decide how the ability changes or kind of like mutates or gets like a buff, etc. So as you see for Right to Strike, the first level increases the damage reduction while using Right to Strike. You increase your damage and healing by a flat rate of 15%, and the healing from Right to Strike also replenishes some of your resilience. And if none of you are familiar with what resilience is, it's that yellow bar above my green HP bar on the bottom left of my screen. He has his Judgment and Radiant Pulse, Divine Aegis, right? So if we were to put 3 points in Judgment, the first one hits against judged enemies, deal additional break damage. And the base ability of Judgment is marks enemies with his Judgment skill. It taunts them, and when you hit a marked target that you basically, I guess, debuffed and taunted with Judgment, you deal bonus damage, and anyone hitting, so that means anybody in your ally squad hitting that enemy, it will restore their own HP, right? So your hits against judged enemies deal additional break damage, and what break damage is each enemies have that yellow bar above their HP as well. So when I'm in Judgment, I'm doing extra damage to that yellow bar. You see how the yellow bar is going down faster than that red bar? That means I have more break damage in my kit than I do regular damage, because I'm hitting through that resilience at a faster rate than I am doing damage to his HP. And those are 2 separate damage indicators, right? Break power, the break power stat, right, is the guard, right? So that's that yellow resilience bar. Break power is just straight damage to that, not to their HP bar that kills them. We can kill them and never affect their break guard meter, right? But for when you break an enemy's guard, they take it's like double damage essentially, because they have no shielding or nothing. They're super vulnerable. But that's what break power essentially is. So weapon power, ability power, crit power, all this, that stuff deals damage to their HP. So break power is we're breaking that resilience guard. So Judgment increases, at level 1, just that base increases the break damage. And if we go to Radiant Pulse, it forms a divine shield that blocks projectiles. So some enemies shoot stuff at you, or some bosses shoot stuff at you. As you see, he throws that kind of gloom thing at him. It shows in the little animation. You block all of that, right? And it also sends out Radiant Pulses that deals damages to enemies in front of the shield. And at level 1, it sends out a second pulse. And at level 2, it also sends out smaller pulses the whole entire time it's active. And then at level 3, you're healing enemies behind your shield. And then his Divine Aegis is the absolutely best team ultimate that we do have in the game right now. It creates a powerful barrier that protects Wingrave and all of his allies inside of it, making them immune Keyword immune to all damage and healing them over time while standing in the barrier. Going on a quick tangent about this ability. While it's active, you take absolutely 0 damage. No matter if it's dot damage, it doesn't matter if it's like an instant wipe mechanic, it does not matter. This is the absolutely like pinnacle, like I guess like paladin ability, if you would. And at level 1, you extend the duration by the invulnerability field by 50%. So that means his ult gets extended by an additional 50% flat rate just for putting 1 point into it. And at level 2, any incoming damage also grants a stack of vengeance, which increases your weapon power for 10 seconds, and that stacks up to 5 times. So while you're standing there getting hit, taking no damage, if you get hit 5 times, you essentially get like 50% increase to your weapon power for that 10 seconds. And then at level 3, inside the vulnerability field, when it ends, everybody will be granted a damage shield that blocks a moderate amount of damage and lasts 20 seconds. So when you get shields in this game, it applies to your HP bar right here, like a thin little white line that'll show that you're getting a shield. I'll be demonstrating that like a little on, probably like with this or something, because I have an ability to do shit. Right? And just going on kind of like a little thing. So boom, we have this, right? It heals us. The sword heals us. Boom. We taunt them. And we're doing the extra damage to his break damage right now. Boom, we do the shield. It's pulsing. And boom, look at we break his shield, and look at that. He starts taking enormous amounts of more damage. Right? And a lot of people do get confused, or just because maybe there's not like matchmaking, or there's not really amazingly hard content right now that requires set roles, but going with what I believe is the envisionment for this is that this is basically a paladin character, right? This is gonna be your tank. This is gonna be the one that heals the team. This one's gonna be in the forefront. If you like big beefy characters, or if you like being the support backbone for your team, this is definitely the character you want. If you do not, if you want someone that's going to do a lot of damage, or if you want somebody, that's spec for other things besides being a tank healer, essentially, this is like literally, if you played World of Warcraft, Lost Ark, any of these, this was literally the definition of paladin, like, a tank healer. Even his passives, I mean, heals, right? There's no damage really in this kit. It's all debuffing, taunting, healing, right? That's all you're doing on Wingrave. Wingrave is basically the support god right now that we have, if you would. And for his affinities, right? We look into his perks. Healing pulses restore the guard break meter, right? So when you're healing allies and the resilience bar, because we all have the resilience bar, and you take double damage if it breaks against you too. That restores the your allies' guard break meter, which is kind of crazy. And then your healing pulses lower your ability cooldowns, and those cooldowns get lowered, so you can buff all your allies and heal your allies faster, right? And then your healing pulses generate threat on enemies, so they're taking even more. You're taking even more aggro away from all your teammates, right? Then your healing pulses and damage word here reduce the incoming damage by 10% of a recipient, so you're just getting a 10% flat damage negation for your teammates on top of healing them. Then you have your damage surge. Healing pulses increase the weapon power of your recipient by 5% for 8 seconds. So now we're buffing the weapon power, of our teammates. And then emitting healing pulses, it slightly changes our ultimate, which gives our team invulnerability and also buffs. So everything in his kit. Look at Healing Waves increases healing of his pulses by 20. Healing Waves is an additional 10% of Wingrave's max HP, right? It's healing himself even faster to be tankier. Melee finishes and eagle eye shots will send out an extra healing pulse, right? There is nothing in this kit that is boosting his damage or doing anything, right? This is all healing. This is all taunting. This is literally the definition of a tank. Once again, for people, if you've heard or anybody says that Wingrave sucks because he can't do any damage, it's like judging a fish for not being able to fly. He is 100% a Paladin-esque character, and in combination with that, tank healer. I mean, if you like to be tank, if you like to not die, if you like to be a support for your team, especially if you're playing in a friend group, and you got like a friend who likes to go glass cannon DPS, being a Wingrave for them, or it's just fire. And if we same thing, we go to his talent trees, there's not too much crazy here, right? We can get bonus weapon power equal to 20% of our max health. Weapon abilities charge 15% faster. Damage heals physical defense. You lose 20% less stamina when blocking. No longer can be interrupted by enemy attacks in combat. After using ultimate ability, buff to allies again, right? Wayfinder ability, heal all allies around you. Healing allies again, right? Each time you hit an enemy for a weapon attack, right, causes ability power, and our healing pulses do scale for ability power. So, same thing when going to Alkalides, converts 15% of physical defense as weapon power. I mean, you get kind of like your damage stacks here, weapon power from the weapon masteries. But all in all, like I said, if you're looking for a tank. Most, I mean, Warmasters in general are going to be your kind of like tankier characters. I think Wingrave's more spec'd out to be a healer than anything, and I'll get more into Sanjaya here in a bit, and Grindel also, but definitely, you know, Wingrave's your Paladin-esque character. And right now, going on to Sanjaya. Once again, she is a Warmaster, so as I previously said, you know, Warmaster is going to be your tankier characters. But she is probably one of the most unique characters I have played in any kind of like ARPG. Like, you know, when you think of, I guess, like, you know, Warmasters, kind of think of more like, you know, Paladin, you know, tank, maybe like a Barbarian or something along those lines. Everything we've been seen before. But Sanjaya is extremely unique in her own right. I mean, just looking at her talents right off the bat, I mean, her abilities right off the bat. Gladiator Pummel. You punch forward, then hold to showboat, right? And on release, Sanjaya punches again, fully showboating, increases the damage of the follow punch. So on a quick little tangent about Sanjaya is she's a gladiator. So she kind of has like some like illusion, something going on wrong with her lore. I'm not entirely deep dived into the lore, but she basically has like, you know, she constantly hears a crowd in her head because she used to be a gladiator. So she's always showboating, basically taunting her enemies, you know, bragging in the middle of the fights, basically, and you hear the crowd clapping and stuff in the background, and that, you know, boosts her energy. And essentially, it's like the most unique concept of a character I've ever seen, and she's extremely fun to play. But going on to the levels for this, your next weapon attack within 5 seconds does bonus ability damage. So after you taunt, or after you use this ability, and then you go attack or use an next ability, right? Then it gets bonus ability attached to it. So you do this. I'm playing on controller, so this is X for me. So, you know, you would do X. I personally like to get the showboat meter all the way to fill, because then you get the maximum benefits. But then, you know, essentially, if you're comboing with this, you know, you would just use your X after you get your showboat meter all the way up, and then use an ability, then use X. And it's kind of like a rotation you do with her, is you're constantly kind of using her taunting and her gladiator pummel to generate that showboat meter, so you can keep your constant stacks of buffs, right? Level 2, fully charged punch increases your damage by 20%. Level 3 increases follow-up weapon damage attack by 15%. So when you use this ability, and then you, if you put 3 points into it, and then you go attack with your weapon, that weapon attack's damage is getting a flat 15% increase. So that's extremely nice. And lightning grasp, use lightning to damage and pull all displaceable enemies in a large cone towards Sanjaya. So certain elite enemies, like, or bosses, you're not going to be able to pull in, but like majority of the enemies in the game, you're going to be able to pull in. And, you know, if you're, once again, playing in a group, like, you know, you got maybe like a Nis, or, you know, you got like a Silo, you know, you can coordinate with your team, like, hey, I'm going to pull them in, boom, you know, your DPS uses the ability. Or if you're playing solo, you wait for your weapon ability to come up, you pull them all in, and bam, you do your big weapon ability damage and do massive damage to a good crowd. So it's definitely a great ability. Level 2, it slows enemies hit by 30% for 6 seconds. And then at level 3, pulled enemies take 30% more damage for 6 seconds. So when she pulls them in, if you put 3 levels into it, you know, she's slowing them by 30% and also making them take 30% more damage for 6 seconds. So she's pulling them in and debuffing them, right? So going more on like tank rolls. Gain favor, it's a hold to showboat for roaring the crowd. On release, damages and taunts nearby enemies while buffing Sanjaya and her allies, increasing the weapon power and ability power for 10 seconds. Right, so she's buffing herself and her allies, key, right? Warmasters are all selfless characters. Once again, if you're trying to do like some solo DPS, you're not really about the kind of tank life, or you're not really about buffing teammates and whatnot, then Warmaster may not be the class for you, if that's not what you're looking for. But once again, Showboat at level 1 increases the effectiveness of the buff. When you hold it, you can hold the taunt, you can cancel it immediately. So when you hold it, it increases the buff by 50%. Damage while taking while showboating during gain favor is reduced by an additional 10%. On top of the base reduced damage that she gets for showboating, right? Holding input, basically holding down the skill, causes her Sanjaya to showboat, and while showboating, she takes reduced damage, increases the crowd favor, and if hit, she gains crowd's favor, stacking healing over time. And as that crowd, you'll see it in a little bit, the crowd's favor bar increases, she gains weapon power and ability power. So she's really good for hybrids. And her Gladiator Pummel has great, just like base break damage on it. But going back to what I was saying, you get an additional 10% damage reduction on top of the damage reduction she's already going to have while showboating. And then this also increases your crowd meter gain by 50%, so it fills up even faster. And then finally moving on to her ult. She riles up the crowd, flashes the thumbs down at her enemies, Nearby allies gain 20% bonus weapon power and ability power for 20 seconds, and during that duration, Sanjaya's weapon attacks cause chain lightning to arc between her enemies, dealing bonus ability damage. Level 1, it's increasing the bonus weapon and ability power by a flat 33%. Pulls in all enemies at level 2 and taunts them, and at level 3 increases the chain lightning damage by 20%. So, and the chain lightning increases is based off ability power too. So I'll go in and I'll showcase a little bit of her abilities right now. But like I said, she is an extremely unique character. I really haven't played anything like it, and I think the design was flawless. So you see, she's gonna showboat to the crowd. You're gonna hear the glowing or hear the cheering, and you see it going. I hold it down, boom, and look, I'm taking like no damage here. I'm taunting to the crowd, boom, explodes, get the bonus. I'm gonna pull them all in. And boom, so that's pretty much the rotation with her. Is you showboat, you attack, get all the buffs, keep all your buffs up basically 24/7 by doing that. You just showboat, attack. Like I said, I personally like to build up my weapon ability. And once I build my weapon ability up, you know, here, I'll come in, pull him, shoom. You know what I mean? So that's definitely a great rotation. I'll show you her ult real quick. To explode, does a nice little burst of damage, and then she has kind of like, you see the lightning around her hands. When she hits, it kind of the lightning will arc between different enemies and stuff. So really cool. Definitely a unique character. She's a little bit more damage oriented if we go into her affinity. Right. Perks. Gain 10% weapon ability and weapon power for 5 seconds when you gain that tier 4 crowd meter. And that crowd meter you see at the bottom of the screen right now. It goes up, you know, when you hold down your abilities and taunt, showboat. And fills your crowd meter. Basically fills the whole bar up without you having to do anything when you fall below 30% HP, and that can only occur once every 30 seconds. You'll see that on your buff bar or when it's back up, and then doubles the amount of weapon power gained from the crowd's fever meter. Like I said, she gets buffed for having that full crowd meter. It reduces the damage taken while showboating by an additional 10%, you know, right? So it already has an innate damage reduction. If you're using that one skill that I was highlighting earlier, that's another 10%. And then if you're using this skill, you know, that's another 10%. So it's like she's getting like 50% damage reduction. Not including the damage reduction that you get from like your defenses and then having your resilience up. So it gets crazy. Getting hit while showboating increases your weapon power by 2%, and that stacks for 10 per stack for 10 seconds and stacks up to 10 times. So essentially, you can just, you know, you're always getting hit during an expedition or a boss fight. So once the fight kind of drags on, as long as there isn't too many mechanics, like, you know, 10 seconds is a pretty really long time too. Getting that 20% total weapon power increase really isn't that hard. And then damage reduction from showboating persists for 1.5 seconds after showboating, which is really huge because as soon as you stop taunting, all that damage reduction that you have goes away. So maxing this out to get that kind of like, you don't have to be micro perfect with it is really nice. But like once, if you, depending, I guess it will really depend on what kind of accessory set you're looking to get the affinity bonuses. But that's something for like a build video later down the line that I'll be making. And then once again, crowd reduces incoming break damage while showboating. Once again, break damage is to your resilience, the yellow bar above your health bar. So having that though, like I said, reduces your incoming damage already. So having reduced break damage to you is super huge. That's what our resilience is for. The more resilience we have, you know, the longer or the tankier our break bar is. Reduces the crowd rate decay by 50%. As you see, I was kind of like leaving combat. It starts dropping away really fast if you don't use your abilities or taunting. And then doubles the amount of ability power gained from the crowd favors meter. You know, the crowd favors meter buffs ability and weapon power. So like this kind of goes if you want to go more ability power or you want to go more weapon power. At max awakening 5 and at wayfinder rank 30 and then leveling your character up to 30, you get a max of 41 affinity points. You can reset these at any time, but you can only have 41 points in at a time. But yeah, that's all I have to say about Sanjaya. Like I said, she's a really unique character. Once again, if you try to compare her to like a burst EPS like Kairos or Nis or like, you know, a survivalist, they're gonna fall short. But they shine bright, definitely in a group. And if, I mean, honestly, like if you want to feel like being a gladiator and, you know, humiliating, basically talking shit to your enemies the whole time, punching them in the face, I mean, she's a pretty fun play for sure. And I think I would recommend at least trying her out once, just because, like I said, me personally, I haven't seen a character design like this, and I think it's extremely unique. But that's all I have to say about Sanjaya. Moving on to Grendel. Grendel is Once again, a Warmaster, so he's a tankier of sorts, but he is a lot more kitted toward his damage in a sense. If you like a barbarian or like a berserker character, this is every barbarian slash berserker character's wet dream. And I mean, just look how badass he looks too. Freaking dope. Right. And getting onto his abilities real quick. He has Tremor, right, where he stomps the floor, sends out a shockwave in a line, deals high break damage innately. That's just what the skill does, right? It does like 2 or 3 ticks, right? That whole wave. You see how it's like a wave. It hits them like, if you time it right at a good distance, you can get all 3 of those waves to hit, and it does crazy break damage innately. And hitting an enemy with a Tremor restores a small amount of real whirlwind source, and that's for correlates with this ability. At level 2, increases the tremor damage and the break by 7%, so increases the already high break damage by an additional 7%. And then it briefly increases the damage against targets that are hit by the tremor as well. So if you're team oriented, that also applies to them. They'll take that increased damage, as well as you doing increased damage to them. His Mighty Leap is a savior for all Warmasters, right? If you hate the Warmaster jump because you can't really bunny hop as well as the other characters, the Mighty Leap is crazy. You get a flat speed boost with it too if you put 1 level into it. So you kind of zoom around. He's one of my favorite characters to use for dungeon crawling, farming for like lunar rings or like event hunting or echo hunting. He's really nice. So level 1, like I said, increases his movement speed for 10 seconds after leaping, and his leap is forward. He jumps forward short distances, but it actually goes pretty far. It damages enemies around, but if you get it to level 2, it increases the break damage of by 15%, and the break damage on it is pretty freaking nuts. And then you can also gain a second charge of it if you put 3 points into it. So you're just doing absolutely crazy break damage. He probably is the best character for break damage right now. And that's breaking the yellow bar once again. There is no character that beats his break damage at the moment, at least. Crazy, crazy damage. Super fun and fast, especially for the Warmaster, since fastest Warmaster without a doubt. And his whirlwind ability is he rapidly spins in a circle and strikes all enemies while moving forward for a short time. So, it's spin to win. You know, level 1, it increases the whirlwind's resource regeneration. Level 2, it increases his damage dealt by 10%. And at level 3, it also heals 2% of a max HP whenever you hit a broken target. Whenever you hit a target that doesn't have that yellow resilience bar, you're getting 2% of HP for like every whirlwind tick, which is just crazy. And then for his Berserker ability, he explodes with rage, dealing heavy break damage to enemies in a large area. So just dealing even more break damage as soon as he roars, right? And they're in that range. You see how the screen blows up and those die? So if they're in the range, does just flat damage and crazy break damage. And then while you're frenzied, you gain increased weapon power, ability power, break power, movement speed, and immunity to break damage, so nobody can damage your resilience. And then when the state ends, you explode, dealing damage enemies to a large area once again. At level 1, it increases the weapon damage even further while you have it active. And at 2, your melee finishers and Eagle Eye generate even more of an ultimate charge, so you can charge your ultimate while you're in this as well. And then at 3, the Roar initially does even more increased damage, and then also pulls enemies in. His enemies are absolutely bananas, and like I said, if you love any barbarian or berserker-esque character, this is like your wet dream come true. And his passive is he enters into a blood rage when he breaks the enemy's guard, the yellow resilience bar, and while raging, he deals increased damage and movement speed even more, and he takes even less break damage. So his resilience bar is like super hard to whittle down, and on top of being like the best break damage character in the game that we currently have. Absolutely crazy. And then just doing a little bit of showcase on him. Like I said, I have the double leap. So I leap and boom, I got that haste. You see it on my bar right now. It pops up on the left. And my haste running around. Boom, I killed him. It's going to be super hard to not kill these guys without break power. And my Grim build is pretty mid-max. So I'll be having a crazy build coming out for him. Boom, I'll get that speed boost. So just go do this ambush real quick. Why not? Boom. You see him, we're getting all these blood rage stacks because they don't have shields. Just crazy, crazy, crazy. Spin to win a little bit.
Who's next?
Like, and his voice lines are absolutely cold too. And then if we go into Infinity here, right, his perks, like I said, he's a lot more spec'd out for damage than I would say Sinjaya Wingrave. He doesn't really buff allies like before, but he's definitely a frontliner. You know, if you want to dive headfirst into everything, he's literally the one to do it. And while in Blood Rage, you deal 10% increased break damage, even more break damage. If you break an enemy while in Blood Rage, you gain a stack of anger. And Anger increases outgoing damage by 3% and decreases incoming damage by 3%. Anger stacks are dropped when Grendel exits Blood Rage, and guard breaking enemies generate more ultimate charge. Increases your weapon damage by an additional 5% while in Blood Rage for his Battleborn. So when he's hitting broken enemies, increases by 5% more. Melee finishers and Eagle Eyes generate Whirlwind resource, even more of a resource to get your Whirlwind back up almost instantly. Gain an extra 2% damage for each sheet of battle combo, up to 20%. So that is actually crazy. You can get a 20% increased damage on top of the innate damage you get from combo. If you see in the bottom in the middle of my screen, it's 115 now for 3 hits. It caps out at 250%, and it gives you flat 200 increase to your damage. And on top of the already combo damage is getting it, now you're getting 20% increased damage for having higher combo meter. That's why it works really well in tangent with the daggers, because daggers are like one of the easiest ones to build up your combo meter with. And then you increase your ability power by an additional 5% during Blood Rage. You regenerate 1% health every second while your guard is broken. So like when you don't have no guard, your health is just getting HP, and there's no cooldown on this or anything at all. So as soon as your guard gets broken, you just instantly start regenerating HP. And then guard breaking an enemy causes an AoE explosion that applies break to nearby enemy, and this scales with your ability power. So like would be really good for dungeon crawling in a sense. You would just break everybody's armor, build a crap ton of ability power, and just everything would kind of like chain explode. Absolutely awesome. And breaking all the enemies lets you just go in with your whirlwind, you know, heal infinitely and deal infinite damage and just be fast. But that's all I have to say about Grendel. This is the Warmaster class. All the Warmasters fully covered in depth guide. Like I said, I've played extensively. A lot of Wayfinder. I'll be making the Survivalist video next. This is going to be the longer of it just because they have 3 characters. I'll probably just end up doing, like I said, Survivalist next and make a new video for them, and then also make a new video for our Arcanist. And stay tuned for all the builds. But until next time.